York Times essay hoping the military would, quote, stand up to Trump draws fire on social media. People are accusing the New York Times of hoping for a military coup against Trump. This in from Fox News. Social media users accused the New York Times of being in favor of a military coup after publishing a guest essay with the headline, "We used to think the military would stand up to Trump. We were wrong." Former National Security Council members Stephen Simon and Jonathan Stevenson wrote the essay on Wednesday in response to President Donald Trump deploying the National Guard to Washington, D.C. in an effort to, what the admin says, combat crime. They remarked that this and other recent orders from Trump registered no public objection from top officers and warned that in the context of domestic theaters, the military can't be politically neutral. Unfortunately, though, we and others had hoped that the military would only respond to calls to action in American cities and states kicking and screaming. We no longer expect resistance from that institution, they wrote. Once, perhaps, traditionalist officers might have leaned on protocol and refused to heed a lawless order, taking inspiration from the generals, Mark Milley and James Mattis, who resisted the uprooting of established military standards in the first Trump term. There's a screenshot of that guest essay there. The article continues. The essay says, but today, general officers no longer seem to see themselves as guardians of the constitutional order. It now seems clear to us that the military will not rescue Americans from Mr. Trump's misuse of the nation's military capabilities. Commentators across X accused Simon and Stevenson and the New York Times of arguing in favor of a military uprising against Trump. The New York Times is a pro-military coup against President Trump. What a flaming pile of trash the Times, written by former Obama NSC officials Stephen Simon and Jonathan Stevenson, GOP commentator Steve Guest wrote. It goes on. Global trade analyst Kenneth Raposa wrote, NYT would absolutely support a military coup if the Democrats were in the White House. Spare me otherwise. Then they'd berate you in how good and just it was. Their urban educated readers who went to NYU would disown you as friends and family for disagreeing, acting as the usual useful idiots they are in service of the regime. A few more of the comments here. By the way, this is the very definition of a coup, and it's the exact opposite of the oath every member of the military swears to uphold, former Byron Donald staff member Jevon A. Price commented. And there's a few more. New York Times is really saying the quiet part out loud, huh? And buy guns and ammunition, townhall.com senior columnist Kurt Schlichter warned. Pirate-wise editor-in-chief Mike Solana wrote, every now and then the media screaming gets to me and I wonder, wait, should I really be worried? And then they do something wild like ask for a military coup in the pages of the New York Times and I remember, nope, lol, they're everything they say they hate. In a statement to Fox News Digital, a New York Times spokesperson defended the piece, saying it was from two seasoned national security experts and thoroughly fact-checked prior to publication. New York Times Opinion regularly publishes guest essays from a wide variety of writers with deep experience in their fields and from across the political spectrum, including the Trump administration, the spokesperson said. Simon also defended the essay, telling Fox News Digital that no one who read it could come to the conclusion that he was in favor of a military coup. As for actions, military leaders should give the president their best professional advice and decide for themselves whether they should resign if their advice is disregarded, Simon said. White House Deputy Press Secretary Anna Kelly criticized the article, calling it dangerous rhetoric. It is highly concerning that the New York Times would print this dangerous rhetoric, calling on our military to rise up against the duly elected commander-in-chief, President Trump. The president was resoundingly elected to restore a focus on readiness and lethality at the DoD, and he is delivering on that promise, Kelly told Fox News Digital. According to the Wayback Machine, the article was also titled, How the Military Became Another Instrument of Trump's Power. The New York Times editorial board previously wrote against Trump deploying the National Guard to Los Angeles with regard to the anti-ICE demonstrations in June. They argued that sending the troops was the real emergency in Los Angeles and creating the very chaos it was purportedly designed to prevent. Well, no one can deny the effectiveness of that deployment. Essentially, the people responsible for maintaining law and order in LA failed to do so repeatedly. So what is the president supposed to do? Let one of these states run rampant with violence, crime, and no accountability, no corrected course? But there is something to be said about the fake left-right paradigm and the potential greater conspiracy at hand. That conspiracy being that both parties are working together towards a common goal, that goal being a complete technocratic takeover, which is well underway, by the way. And that in order to achieve it, the public needs to believe that there is a battle between good and evil, red versus blue, left versus right. And ultimately, the solutions are always more control, more surveillance, more acceptance of militarized law enforcement. And we shouldn't ignore the precedent it sets having the military on domestic streets. It can quickly become, well, it works, people are used to it, and before you know it, the military are walking the streets with machine guns to maintain law and order on the regular. Like what was proposed in DC and other cities, by the way. Nonetheless, the New York Times piece could be considered bordering on incitement of a military coup. The question remains, why does the mainstream media feel so emboldened to publish things like this at this current point in time? Is there a reason why there is this severe push, it seems, from the other side of the political aisle towards furthering division and chaos in society? Well, that reason is ever present. The more that chaos ensues, the larger the police state grows. And as the previous administration paved the way for there to now be no other option than to send in the military, are we now in the position where the manpower just doesn't exist anymore in local law enforcement? Did they defund the police just enough to where any significant attention required in the community is not possible? Are we being prepared for, under the slightest of circumstances, to send in the military? Your freedom now requires military personnel in army fatigues patrolling the streets with machine guns. The only solution here is to reevaluate local law enforcement nationally, state by state, on the ground, their manpower and their values. Their ability to police their own communities and gain back their respect needs to be allowed, like it used to be. Good morning, officer. Good morning, sir. Have yourself a blessed day. Does that really ever happen much anymore? If law enforcement was allowed to do their jobs properly, perhaps there would be no need for any further intervention from the federal government. Perhaps the New York Times can publish that headline instead.